from that perspective, like every step I take, it's calculating that. So me as a human, I'm creating data. From the Apple Watch perspective, I'm also creating data too, right, from fitness elements and that sort of stuff. And so one of the stories I have around the wearable piece is that, a friend of mine's a cardiologist, and when the Apple Watch just recently, I think it's the 4.0 version came out, it's got an EKG monitor in there, and started to realize that, for 18 to 25-year-olds, they needed to go back and look at the algorithms that they built around AI in order to figure out how to take some of that bias out. And the reason for that is just because the thresholds that they had set up initially for 18 to 25-year-olds, it was not meeting those thresholds. They were rejecting a lot more people than what they actually expected to. And so, as we go through and talk about AI and machine learning and blockchain and all of this sort of stuff, I just want to, the only reason I went down this tangent is mainly so that you understand that, these technologies are not perfect. They're still being worked on. They're a lot more immature. There's inherent bias that's already built into a lot of stuff that's out there. And it's up to us also to make sure that as we go through and develop these technologies, that we come back and review the results of those technologies. Because what you don't want to do is build this stuff in, and then all of a sudden you start to realize, especially with HR data, with all kinds of ethics and ethical and risk elements that we're all working on, that some of this data, as you start to mash it up, you can start to see biases come out, right? There could be an ethnic group, there could be a social group, there could be all kinds of different groups that start to get targeted based on the results that come back. And so it's just part of our jobs to make sure that as we go and look at this and understand this, that we should also understand the algorithms that are being put in place in order to make sure that we take out some of these biases, because this can lead to a lot of bad things for the future. So anyway, so this is my soapbox. I'm getting off the soapbox right now. I just want to make sure everyone understood the types of risks and cons that could potentially happen, especially from some of the AI work. So just to let you know, so I stole the framework. I just want to let you guys know that. Being in ethics compliance, I thought that was kind of ironic. So I used Gartner's framework. Gartner comes out with a 2018 trends and framework, and I thought, oh, this was a good way to sort of think about their approach. Now, just to say that I didn't completely plagiarize it, I did bastardize it. So I just want to make sure everyone's clear on that. I completely bastardized this thing. So in their model, they have intelligence first, digital second, and then mesh as third. In my model, I just rearranged it and just said digital first, intelligence second, and mesh as third. And I'll explain why I did that. So in the ethics and compliance space, what I think of is first is really about digital, right? Digital is where a lot of your programs are already at. Like you have online training, you've got communications going out, you have websites that have your code of conduct, all this sort of stuff that's already out there. And I'm gonna, so that's digital. So there's a lot of interactions there. On the intelligence side, this is where AI and machine learning and deep learning come in. It's like taking the information that you get out of digital and doing something with it. Like, how do I get AI and all this sort of stuff focused on that data coming out and doing something with it? And finally, mesh. Mesh is a little bit different in the sense that, so under mesh, they have blockchain, they've got event-driven technologies, things like that. But really, when I think of mesh, mesh is really about trust. So with blockchain, as I'll explain later on, is about entities that don't trust each other. And how do we create a trust relationship with unknown entities, and then driving a transactional component through that trust mechanism. And the same thing goes with event-driven elements, and then also, I also threw in under mesh the whole notion of the gig economy, meaning that there's a whole shared economy that's out there between Airbnb and Uber and things like that. So I thought throw that under mesh as well. I'm going to pause there for 1 second, see if there's any questions. I know I've run through a lot, but I'm going to start to now go through digital intelligence and mesh. training, things like that. The end user generates a ton of data. And then what do we use with that? What do we do with that data? Even chatbots and translations, right? So the human is interacting with something, right? It could be an AI component that's being built, but really underneath the digital interaction piece, it's generating data. Same thing with your websites, augmented reality, and social media. We're all interacting with these elements. So the way I frame up the digital piece is that you've taken something that used to be a physical object, it's now online, and there's new ways of interacting with it. So as a human, I'm interacting with something and generating new types of data, right? So that's the way I've sort of positioned digital. And like I said, I bastardized Gartner. And the other things I want to highlight too is that implementation of all this stuff is not easy. So under chatbots, like I was saying, I spent too much time with IBM. They were working with the Royal Bank of Scotland. And in working with them, what they've come up with is a way they've created a chatbot, and that chatbot is sort of the intercede between any human being from a bank standpoint. So if you want to create a new account, you first go to the chatbot or some element of the chatbot, either by phone or by online, and then work with that, and it'll try to create an account. If it can't, then it'll switch you over to someone else. And so all of their channels sort of fit through that chatbot. Now, it took them close to 3 years to get it to work at the level it is now. So, initially they started off with the chatbot. They worked with it mainly for internal. And from an internal perspective, working with their customer service team, they had a lot of information flowing into the chatbot so that the internal customer service team could find things very quickly. Think of it like a knowledge management system. They went through, they asked you questions, it would start to learn. They also started to teach it procedures. How do I open a bank account? How do I check the balance on my checking account? How do I do this? How do I do that? And so through that, the chatbot was learning. From there, then they started to open it up to more than just the internal people. They started select groups of people that they started to open it up to. And like I said, it took 3 years before now the chatbot is customer facing and handling a majority of their calls coming in. And so the two things that I found interesting is that, for one, 40% they had a 40% reduction in calls because more people were using the chatbot and getting satisfaction from the chatbot perspective. Second thing is people who used to be in customer service had a much higher satisfaction rate because now they're handling much more complex issues. They weren't dealing with, change my password, or, how do I find my account balance, things like that. So they were dealing with much more specific things around that. And so from that perspective, they spent a lot of time and invested a lot of time training and teaching the chatbot exactly what types of information they needed to know in order to satisfy the customers. So with all of these things, you have to start somewhere. So you start small, and like IBM, they tell me all the time, think of something narrow. And then later on, as you'll see on the table, there are sheets of paper we're going to work and do an exercise and all that sort of stuff. But I really want you to really think about, when you think about your own program, what's a small, narrow piece, right? Like everyone wants to say, like, oh, I want a chatbot to run my entire UNC program, and so I don't have to deal with anybody, and they'll just talk to it, and it'll handle everything for me, right? That's going to take people a long time to get to. So how do you think about a narrow piece of work that's AI or some new technology you can focus on? Because it's those narrow pieces or narrow slices that you work on that then bring about bigger and better change over time. Because then you've proven something, then you can build on that proof. So I just want you guys to think about what is some very narrow scope elements that for your own world. And then going a little bit further in terms of some of the educational pieces too, using AI too, another story from IBM is that H&R Block, right? So hopefully, so please don't shoot the messenger. So H&R Block used to take about a month to train all their employees, right? And this tax season now, they're ramping up. It usually takes about a month. And order for those people that deal with taxes to work on it and provide that training. Through IBM, and like I said, it took a long time for them to get to this point, but now it takes them 2 days to provide that training. So from a month down to 2 days is significant, right? So my only question is like, oh man, like hopefully my taxes are simple enough that in 2 days I can just bang them out with H&R Block. But like I said, I think the main thing is like I think they've invested enough in technology to help simplify the entire tax process, which then allows that H&R Block person to focus on all the anomalies, not the happy path through that piece. Jump to the next one. So these are just more examples, and you'll get to see these slides on the website or on the mobile app. So just talking about different types of examples in terms of digital, right? So from like education casting to E&C, and all of these things, as I mentioned here, generate data. They all generate data. And the key to it is then figure out how do I take this data and do something with it, right? How do I make it action? How do I figure out what am I going to do with this data to then, help improve either myself or my job or the programs that I run? All right. So with that, this is where we talk about, artificial intelligence, machine learning, deep learning. So, so the definition of artificial intelligence, right? So it takes data, and that artificial intelligence uses that data, and there's algorithms, right? So an algorithm is just a piece of software code that's built that's trying to mimic some process procedure, right? And so with that, there's subsets of AI. So machine learning is essentially just a subset of artificial intelligence. What machine learning is really just the algorithms. It's really providing those algorithms that they can leverage that data and do something new. And as it learns, as it hits anomalies or errors, it's learning from that to try to improve upon that. And that's really what using machine learning is. And then the subset of machine learning is deep learning. And so with deep learning, what deep learning really is about is trying to mimic human brain responses. So in some sense, like recognizing the photos. So when you look at your pictures, you recognize people. That's a concept of deep learning. So if you have a whole photo bank, if you go through your phone, it'll say, oh, find all the people. I don't know if you guys have done this, but on the photos on the iPhone and even on my Mac, I can go and have it search the entire photo database for people. So that's a deep learning concept. Another deep learning concept is like speech to text, or recognition of speech. So with Siri or Alexa or Google, right, you can talk to it and then it responds back. So that's another notion of deep learning from an AI perspective, right there. I laugh because I feel like all of a sudden, I remember, so my parents are immigrants from India, and I remember them talking to their parents back in India, and I always wondered why they kept yelling on the phone. It's like, is it hard to hear? Is there some issue with the technology? Like, what's going on? Because they're always yelling on the phone, right? Well, I came home to my house the other day, and I realized, like, this experience has not changed at all, right? I get home, and my kids are yelling at Alexa or Google, and I'm like, I think it can hear you. I don't think you need to speak louder. Like, I don't know if it can actually, translate you faster or better based on you screaming at it. So, fortunately for me, I feel like it skipped my generation, but it's gone to my kids between the yelling over and commanding something. So I'm going to pause there and see if there's any questions around AI, machine learning, deep learning as a concept. Okay. So here's some more examples, right? So for example, in AI, obviously, like we all think about Amazon and how it's going to rule the world. And so, through their algorithms, their AI algorithms, right, they are getting more and more accurate at trying to predict what you want, what you need, right? And so, they collect a tremendous amount of data. really looking at like, image recognition. So for radiologists, right, they look at x-rays all day, they look at CT scans, and then they're able to scan all of this stuff through their AI tool and then use image recognition to find and diagnose people in terms of diseases. So these are just examples of ways that they're using AI as a way to improve not only just using the technology, but improve diagnosis of people and finding acute issues and things like that. And then finally, with deep learning, as I mentioned, Siri, Alexa, and Google Assistant. And it's really about finding the patterns, right? So through AI, it finds the patterns, and then if there's anomalies or any errors in that pattern, they're changing those algorithms to take those things into account or learn from those things to take them into account. So that way, these things get better and better over time. Okay. So finally, mesh. This is about trust relationships. So what is blockchain, right? So blockchain is an interesting concept. The analogy I'm going to use is the old days of Napster, right? Like there was a peer-to-peer network, people stored music on their local machines, and then through Napster, through this peer-to-peer sort of association, you could distribute music around. So similarly, blockchain is kind of in that same vein. So it's a distributed network. There's no centralized one system that knows everything. It's completely distributed. And typically, through a transaction of some sort, that transaction is then distributed across this network too. So there's elements of that transaction across the network that then, if the transaction is complete, right? So, for example, an event happens like, I'm buying a boat, someone's trying to sell me a boat, I finally get delivery of that boat, and I say it's done. But we've already set up a contract ahead of time, right? We set up like, okay, in blockchain, I've set up the notion of I'm buying a blue boat, it's going to be this shape, this color, and at the end of the day, this is how much it's going to cost. Right? So that's sort of like, think of it like a contract. But the contract is digital. It's not a physical contract, it's a digital contract. And that digital contract is then known throughout the entire network. So not just not one machine centrally knows it, it's like the entire network knows it. And so at that point, when that transaction happens, then at that point, the entire network knows. The entire network is updated as well in terms of filling out or transacting upon that piece. And so the reason they call it block is because it's not just one transaction. There's millions of transactions always happening, right? And so those transactions come in groups or blocks. That's why it's called blockchain. So the block of transactions that happens and that gets updated across the network is why it's called a blockchain. And so typically with blockchains, they're really associated with Bitcoin. So Bitcoin became the de facto in terms of payment as a payment engine, right? So blockchain, Bitcoin, basically, there's no centralized server. It's completely distributed from a transactional or from a monetary or currency standpoint. And so in conjunction with blockchain and Bitcoin, these two things working in conjunction with each other is what created sort of the Bitcoin notion and having transactions happen and the money exchange happening at the same time around that. So in terms of, so that's one piece of it. But then going on to event-driven. So event-driven is very simple. It's basically something happens, something else happens. So like if X happens, then Y should be triggered, and then that happens as well. It's not, from an event-driven standpoint, it's not so different from the ERP days of using these, what we call them buses. There used to be a whole notion of like, having these plugins, and then all these systems would talk to each other, and based on one event happening, then it would send a message to another system. So for example, if your ERP system knew that a person was being hired, right, then that would send out messages to the HR system, which would then trigger the creation of that user, which would then trigger something else happening in the payment, in the payroll system, which would say, okay, have this person now be set up on the payroll system, things like that. So there used to be this whole notion of plugins that you would have with the ERP system and other subsystems that would then create sort of this event-driven approach. not any different from that. It's just a new way of approaching it versus having all these different plugins. They're now looking at building it directly into code so that these transactions or any sort of event becomes what I call asynchronous. So asynchronous meaning like it doesn't need to happen in real time. It can just happen behind the scenes and then they all get completed basically. Which is also a trust relationship, right? So from one system to the other system, there has to be a trust relationship that says, if this is complete, now I can trigger this. And both systems have to have that trust. And finally, like, as I said, I bastardized this whole thing. I added shared economy to this as well. So shared economy has to do with like Airbnb, having to do with Turo. I don't know how many people know about Turo, but then, the different elements like Airbnb, as you guys know, like I can rent someone's room or house or something like that. There's a trust relationship in terms of Airbnb providing that trust relationship in order for me to rent a house. Turo is the same thing. I can rent people's cars. So my car sits in my driveway 95% of the time. I try to convince my wife to let me rent out my car on a daily basis. She's like, you live in New York City, are you stupid? They're going to just wreck it. So Turo is another website where you can actually rent people's individual cars and use them everywhere you go. And for whatever reason, I seem to use it mainly in Colorado. Whenever I go to Colorado, I use Turo there I think because I can get a 4-wheel drive for a lot cheaper than I can with rental car companies. So that's another shared economy element. So just to give examples, Spotify has to deal with, from a blockchain standpoint, they've built out and they bought actually a company that does a blockchain. So with Spotify, they have to deal with a lot of rights management around music. So every time someone listens to a piece of music, they have to pay royalty on it. Right? So using blockchain, this is a way to create a completely transparent transaction that as I play music on Spotify, they're noting all the music that I play, which then leads them to have a full transaction view that they can then go to the record companies and say, like, this is how much I owe you in terms of the rights management around those songs specifically. And then I already talked a little bit about event-driven and shared economy. I think I had another story on this. So the other story I have too is interesting. So I used to work a long time ago for the BBC, the British Broadcasting Corporation. So as a consultant, I was hired as an employee of theirs, but I was farmed out as a consultant for them. So one of our clients was ESPN. So ESPN, similar to this, had a similar mechanism. They didn't call it blockchain, but it was very similar where, anytime, they would play on SportsCenter, they would play all kinds of different clips from different sports venues, right? And they had to keep track of all of that so that they were compliant from to be able to, against those rights, those sports rights that they had purchased in order to show stuff. So this is what, they used something very similar back in the day around rights management and then tracking those rights in order to, ensure that they were compliant to show different types of sports clips. I think one of the major rules that they had was that if the game is playing, they can't show the game, any clips from that game until it's completely ended as well. So with that, I'm going to pause. We're going to do a quick exercise. I think we have 30 minutes remaining. And so the first thing I want you to do is look on your table. You should see a page with numbering on it. It should look like this one. Here.
If anybody's short, raise your hand and I will explain to you.
We didn't get the analytics page either. Oh, we didn't? Oh no. Wrong.
So I'm going to explain what we're going to do here and go through this quick exercise. It's a very simple exercise. I would actually encourage you to try to do it with your kids too at some point. Maybe not the last question, but definitely the first and second question. Because they usually, like, I've done this with my kids, they actually come up with better answers than I could ever dream of because they're digital natives, right? They breathe technology like it's nobody's business. Like even when my kid was 3, they knew how to use an iPhone 10 times better than I did. And they were like, not afraid to get anything wrong. So, so the first question basically, correct my sheet real quick. So the first question is, rank your technology innovation changes which have impressed you, right? And how it has changed your life. So basically, think about it from this perspective, right? There's new things always coming around. Like, what's the 1 or 2, 3, maybe 2 or 3 things that really affected you, right? And this is at a personal level. Don't think about company. Don't think about any of that other stuff. Like you think about your personal life. Like, what technologies have really brought about the most innovation or simplified your life in a very easy way, right? Like, I know for me, I'm always last minute, and as I'm talking about this, I'm very last minute too. So, what are the technologies that really affected you in terms of really improving your life and thinking about how impressed you are? So we're going to spend, so fill that piece out, and then also go to the next question too, and fill that out, because what I want you to start to think about is of that technology that's really impressed you and helped you, what do you think they collected on you from a data perspective that has really helped you from that perspective, right? So, for example, so my friend, and I'll relate the story as you guys fill it out. So my friend just bought a Tesla, and he loves his car. He's not a car guy. He's just not. He's a techno guy. He loves technology and stuff. But what's changed his life? And I was like, this is probably not the safest thing in the world, but fine. So he bought autopilot on the Tesla. He loves the autopilot because in the morning he's always running late. He has to be at work by 7 a.m. He gets in his Tesla. He grabs out of his fridge some yogurt and some food or whatever. As soon as he hits the highway, he hits it on autopilot. He takes his hands off the wheel and starts eating breakfast. And this is how he eats breakfast every morning now, driving to work on the highway, because autopilot is driving him on the highway. And he lives in Atlanta, Georgia, so there's tons of traffic.
Stay away.
And I was asking him about that too. It's how do you deal with traffic? He's like, oh, it's even better in traffic. He thinks it's the best thing in traffic because he didn't you have to pay attention when you're in traffic, right? Like stop-go traffic, car in front of you, certain distance, that sort of stuff. He's like, it's even better for that because he doesn't have to do anything. He just lets the car worry about pacing. If someone cuts him off, the car slows down, all that sort of stuff. So for him, it's enriched his life because now he eats breakfast properly without having to worry about and run to work because he's eating breakfast in his car as the car is driving him to work. Mini vacuum cleaner. That would be another innovation that I should.
Oh, that's nice.
But it doesn't listen back.
data on, now they moved to a, what is it, like a run, treadmill, and then they also have Peloton Digital, so you don't even need a treadmill, you don't need anything. You can just have like basically the interface in front of you and be able to work through that. That's great.
Skyping medical appointment saves time.
Oh yes, that's true. That's true. So you think about like the data that's collected there, right? Like from that perspective, you know, even with Peloton, the data that they collect too in terms of usage.
This might be taking it way back, but just any type of online registration. I don't have to go somewhere. I don't have to look through a paper catalog. I don't have to stand in line at the NBA, the MB. I can go online. I can register in 5 minutes. Summer camps, everything.
That's great. That's a good one too. So let me say that you sound like my wife. My wife hates talking to people, so she goes online and does everything. And then if it all breaks down and fails, she calls me to go call them.
I confess I'm slightly obsessed with my Ring app on my doorbell.
Oh yes.
And that all the safety reports that go along with that.
Yes. So I have a story around that. So one of the people I work with, he was, you know, he's actually works from home, stays at home. And so doesn't have any lights turned on. So some guy came to his door and he has Ring and it notified him. So he's just watching the person, like, what the hell is he doing? All of a sudden the guy starts to walk around his house and then he started yelling. He's like, what the hell are you doing? And the guy was shocked that someone was home. But through Ring, he was able to like scare this guy into like, why are you walking around my house? You know, and him being at home around that too.
Well, I'm going to be very basic. Alexa. Alexa's done everything from wake me up in the morning, tell me how long I need to roast a chicken, to calm my godson down with a little baby shark when he needs it.
That's great.
GPS, like Google Maps, obviously it's tracking everybody and where we are, but it's helpful in knowing how to avoid a slip up.
Yes, yeah, I completely agree with that one too. Like, I have to say, I've shut off one part of my brain because of that. Like my wife used to tell me I was great at like maps and directions and all that, but because of Google Maps and Waze and all of the data that they collect, it's amazing like how much I don't retain. I feel like help fill it over. That part of my piece should really fill it over.
Well, I think Amazon has on their online shopping, it will not only collect what my spouse spends the most time looking at, it will collect the zip code that we live in, so it knows the demographics. It will collect how much he is willing to pay for something, and it will price it accordingly. My wife thinks that's absolutely wonderful, and I say, did you go out and find a better price? You have paid the best price for Amazon, you have not necessarily paid the best price for us.
Yeah, that's a tricky one there. Well, there's two things to that, right? They collect data so that maybe you can buy a better present for your wife, potentially, based on what she looks at. But number two is like, if you live in a high price area, I live in New York City, so I live in Brooklyn, and so I know I'm not getting the best price on anything. Right? So I probably should change my zip code to something else.
Actually, I think the last 6 weddings that I've been to, they've all been through dating apps. So it's just been completely life-changing. And it's just been terrible on the bank account because people are finding each other really quick. Assuming like you're the way, and you're like, oh, not another one. So definitely dating apps.
What would be interesting on the dating app is like after they get married, the predictive nature of like if you would have to go to a second wedding afterwards. Okay. One last one.
Going to take the other side of the Amazon from Walmart. So retail, brick and mortar, the self-checkouts, and soon the pass-through checkouts. You're not going to have to even put stuff in your cart and walk right out. Some things working on. So
that's great. Yeah, that would be a lifesaver for all of us, right? But you know, think about the data. You already collect a ton of data. Like how much faster it would collect data. Even like people walking through the aisles who already know what's in their cart, and then being able to get their graphic information on that. That's great. So the last question was just like, as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, like really thinking about like, so all these things have changed our life, and we collect data on all this sort of stuff. what are some very simple things that you can think about for your own programs, for the NC departments that you work in, the risk mitigation that you try to do? There's very simple things that you can think about that where if you have the data or you can collect data, you could actually do something with. I don't know if I gave you guys time. Did you guys already fill it out? Okay. Why don't we go ahead and hear some?
So we have a lot of training and communications we do on our online website at USAA. And this piece has been there for some time, but I didn't really think to use it, and that is to go back and see how many views each article or video or whatnot has received. And it just dawned on me to do that recently because we wanted to tell a new leader how many times someone watched our video and compare it to some others. And it's really given me some insight into what the employees are willing to spend a couple of minutes watching or not. So it can help me tailor future topics.
Yeah, that's perfect.
One thing we were looking at was identifying individuals and their associated business activities as opposed to rolling out a risk, one-size-fits-all risk, understanding how to do it in terms of policy deployment, training, monitoring based on segments and what business activities relate to that risk and the associated mitigation.
That's perfect.
I have a couple of comments, one of which goes in line with what I heard from a couple of colleagues. That's broadly around demographics. So how do you kind of overlay the demographics on whatever that you're assessing compliance for, and that hopefully gives you some actionable insights into possibly the cultural risk within the organization. And the second one is slightly different. I'm looking at more like the process flows. And if there are bites of that process flow which are really repetitive, really mundane, and could use some automation.
Yeah, no, that's great. And like I would say, I know budgets are tight, all this stuff. So the more you can automate, it makes your life 10 times easier.
We're finally moving to a web-based code of conduct as opposed to a PDF. So some of the data analytics we'll be able to do with that in terms of what topics people are actually visiting. How many visits are we seeing a month? Are we seeing ebbs and flows seasonally when we launch a particular training? There'll be some return on investment that we'll be able to get from that data.
That's great. Can I get the mic over here?
So we've recently automated our ethics inquiry program. So previously it was very manual, email-based, and so now what we've done is we've migrated we're working our way towards AI. It's a step in the right direction, but now what we do is we migrated everything to a website, and we also have a number of links to most frequently asked content about other sites, and so now we can actually track and measure that, and we're using that to affect our training programs and increase additional web content accessibility.
Okay, so that was the last question here. So I'm going to jump over to the next thing, which is if you look on your table, you see this curve, or the XY axis. So it's a very simple exercise. I've talked a lot about all of these different things, the way they're being used. So on your Y-axis, you have how easy or hard is it to implement, right? And then from a maturity to immaturity level, where does it stand? So you don't have this? Okay, we'll get some copies to you. So with this, I listed down all the different technologies and buzzwords and all the different things down at the bottom. And what I'd like you to do is if you could just figure out for yourself how to map it on this. So think about for yourself, would you consider this mature or immature from a technology standpoint? Or would you consider it easy or hard to implement? Because there are certain things that are easy to implement and they're mature, right? So that's an easy one. That goes down the bottom corner, bottom left-hand corner. I guess my right hand, your left-hand corner. And then, there's other things that are hard. Like I'll use blockchain as an example, right? Blockchain is a very complex technology. There's a lot of crypto encryption that has to occur. It's distributed, so it has to be across a large network. And it's hard to implement too. So that would fall all the way in the top, I guess my left, your right corner, right? So as you think about these technologies, see if you can plot these different elements across the spread, and then in a few minutes, I'll show you how I did mine, and then we can compare and figure out how, from an adoption standpoint. Because, like I said, as I talked about the chatbot from the Royal Bank of Scotland, right? It took them, they started off small, and they did increments, right? And that small piece was very narrow. They did it first from a knowledge management standpoint, and then over time it grew. It took them about 3 years, and then now it's one of their centerpieces around being able to provide customer service, and even new prospects, new customers being able to use that chatbot as a way to create accounts and things like that. And we'll do that for probably 3 or 4 minutes.
So are we plotting what's on the bottom of it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. You can just use what's on the bottom. These are all the different topic areas or technologies, and then you can plot those at the top.
Organization. We could use the website or social media as part of it.
So this is how I sort of position all the different elements, right? From mature to immature to easy to hard, from that perspective. So obviously a lot of us do educational, training. So, that's fairly mature. It's probably easy to implement. There's lots of, I work for a company that does this in day out. The ENC website, it's a fairly mature technology as well. Implementation is not too difficult. There's lots of people that implement this sort of stuff. And same thing with social media. Now, as we start to move into more, I don't want to call it, but more immature technologies, right? From VR to AR, it's a fairly new concept, right? So with AR specifically, right, you're taking physical objects and then layering on a digital experience on top of that. So, how do you, doing that type of work is fairly complex. It's a bit immature, but it's actually not so hard to implement. We've done a lot of it at LRM. Same thing with wearables and using the shared economy. These are things that are starting to mature quite a bit, and then implementation is a little bit trickier, especially in a corporate environment where data privacy, network security, deployment of technology in general through the IT staff and for them to support it going forward too is a little difficult. And then finally, like blockchain, like I said, I put it in the top right hand corner. The only company that I'm aware of that actually leverages that's built their own is JP Morgan. They've built their own blockchain network themselves specifically. Others are trying to create their own networks and become de facto, but like I said, JP Morgan is probably the largest financial bank that I'm aware of that's built their own network. So it's pretty immature and it's hard to implement.
So Neil, I have a question. Do you see mobile technology and how creative and innovative we've been in the use of mobile technology platforms to be kind of across a number of these, or?
Yeah, so that's a good observation. So when I look at it from a mobile device standpoint, there's two things. One is just what are you trying to accomplish with it? So education, casting, websites, anything that's pushing data to you from a mobile device standpoint, it's not too difficult. I think the hardest challenges that you'll face, at least in my experience, based on the mobile device that we've been through LRN selling and working with large corporations around, is just working with the IT staff for deployment. Right? Getting that thing deployed in a large organization is kind of tough. We especially we think about it from a mobile device management perspective, because you don't want all this data sitting out on a Google Play or iTunes location. But then if you want people to interact and collect data on you, that's where it starts to get tough, right? So from a chatbot or AI perspective, there's lots of consequences around GDPR, around data privacy, where you're collecting data on people and then trying to capture that data in ways that people can interact with as well. So, for example, we have what we call geolocation pushes. So if I go into a certain geolocation, let's say, not to pick on China, but I'm going to pick on China. If I go into China and I'm dealing with government officials, as soon as I step into China's soil, you can have push notifications come to you, right? But that basically notifies the mobile app that I'm now in this country doing something. So, we've had to work through data capture issues around that specific piece, because I may be in China, but is it also tracking everywhere that I move within China too? And so these are the types of reassurances that we have to give to the companies in order to say, look, we're only tracking that, once you cross the fence of geolocation, that's just the notification that we're providing. We're not tracking whether or not they're in some specific area.
So one of the things that kind of interests me, along those lines, is just-in-time intervention.
Sure.
For ethics and compliance issues, and the possibility of using anticipatory computing
sure.
to, for example, if it looks at my Outlook calendar and I'm meeting with a foreign official, that might be a good time to deliver something to me.
Sure.
As a reminder. Any thoughts or comments about that?
So there's complexity tracking, and what are you trying to improve on, right? From it going through Outlook and checking your email, right? So this is all company data, right? Outlook is considered company data. So so your company has the right to provide that level of like intervention, right? And I even thought about it from the perspective like, even if I book tickets, let's say I book tickets to someplace, right? And I go through the company travel agency, right? I could, from an ethics compliance standpoint, send that person notification automatically that indicates like, here's the 10 things you need to worry about when you go to a specific country, right? And you know, if you try to, my view too is like it. So this is where my education hat comes on, and I worked in higher ed for a long time. People don't read, right? Kids don't read. They all first go to the questions. They first answer the questions, and if they miss it, then they go back and study what they missed. So that's usually typically how higher ed, what we notice in higher ed students. I also believe that in adults too. If you send them the policy, it's a 4-page policy, they're not going to read it. So I do believe that having something like that, I call them microcards, having like a card pared down or some way of providing that knowledge in 10 or 15 bullet points that's simple, easy to digest, that can help provide a more proactive approach that indicates, like, for example, like you were saying, it's going through Outlook, or it could be your travel agency. You book whatever, based on, it doesn't matter where you're going, whether it's Idaho or China or some other place, you can proactively send out communication notification against that then indicates to that person, like, these are the 5 or 10 things that I just need to be aware of. That's just in the back of my head the whole time. So I believe technologies are more and more going to be coming out with that because, you know, it's an integrated world. Data is data to a certain degree. And if I can get into the stream of that data, so where we talked about event-driven, that's an event-driven type of technology. I book a flight, the event happens, me booking that flight triggers a new type of response from an ENC perspective, and then I get that information that then proactively tells me what I need to worry about going to a certain region. Does that answer? Yes.
Just one comment to your question. I think that the place you were trying to go to was predictive rather than just event-based, right? And so in order to do that, you certainly need to take the event-based incident of this person booked the ticket to wherever. The problem with push communications is the person can just X out the window or delete the email or whatever it is. If it's a pop-up on an email or whatever. Ideally, the models that I see organizations trying to move to is more to take some sort of an additional element to that event base, which is usually some sort of simulation data, right? So say, for example, we take that instance of that person met with a government official. Has that person in the past give some data to show how prepared or how equipped they are to handle a situation with a government official? If they're very prepared, you probably don't need to do much, right? If they're not, you definitely want to sort of put up a red flag and say, hey, that's when you get into predictive modeling. So there are now definitely data points that exist in both camps individually. There's not yet a lot of platforms that have automatically brought it together that's like a single system. But there are organizations that are building data warehouses, computational more.
So I have like basically a minute left, or I'm actually over time now. Can I spend 1 minute answering questions? Any questions?
Sunil, what's your impression and understanding about the maturity of unstructured data analytics or text analytics in the industry in general?
So you'll be surprised. I actually find that to be more mature than structured data. So here's my view of it, right? So structured data is easy to collect. You normalize it, you get access to it, you create all kinds of queries, that sort of stuff. That's sort of the traditional piece. With unstructured data, what I find with the technologies out there, like we use MongoDB, there's Hadoop out there, those things have made it super easy. So getting data in and then creating, in MongoDB it's blocks. So you create these blocks and you have to answer all these questions. It's incredibly fast to pull out the types of analytics that you need out of that. And so I've found that unstructured data has not been that big of a problem relative to structured data. I actually find structured data harder because there's all these relationships that are there, and you have to know how all this relationship works in order to actually pull out the type of data that you need versus an unstructured data. I just ask the question, and then it goes out and tries to find it. Now, there's more work that I have to do to like sift through it to see how real or how true it is, but at least I get the results back very quickly that then I can do lots of iterations on it versus in structured data, I really need to know the data model and understand that data model fairly heavily in order to ask the right questions to get the data out. So that's why, me personally, I find that the technology has been much more mature because I can iterate through it much faster.
That's great. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Now, before lunch, thank you, Sunil. We have a sponsor spotlight on GAM Integrity. Valerie Charles, please welcome her, Chief Strategy Officer. Valerie.
Hi everybody, how are you? So this is my first time doing something that's this short, and I'm a big talker, but I promise to stay in 15 minutes because everybody's hungry. All right, do I move the slides? Yes. Okay. So very quickly, I am a compliance lawyer. I spent most of my career in law firms doing white-collar investigations work with a focus on the SCPA. I then moved in-house to a small technology company, maybe 2,500 employees, and I stood up a program. So really from zero, I built a program there. And in my experience, I learned a lot about what technology was available. So during that time period, I ended up hiring about 7 external vendors to support my tiny program. And it was a high-risk program. It was Israeli-owned, Swiss-held company with infrastructure projects all over the Middle East, so very high risk, especially in due diligence. Excuse my voice, I'm a little bit under the weather. But long and short is I discovered that dealing with my external vendors was as much of a part of my job as sort of the strategic, judgment-based part of my job. The sort of administrative tasks in dealing with the external vendors to help with the administrative tasks was a much larger percentage of my time than I would have liked. And I think that from now working again and kind of having this bird's eye view of how people are dealing with compliance technology, I don't think that that's unusual. I think that that's really the status quo and the standard that everybody's expecting. So for me, when I made the decision that I wanted to work in legal tech and reg tech, I sort of had a fascination with technology and have been doing a lot of networking to understand how my history and background could fit into a tech company. I met with probably nothing short of 25 existing companies as well as startups before I met our founder at GAN Integrity, who sort of said to me, if you think about HR platforms and finance platforms, it wasn't always true that the different parts and pieces of managing those programs were handled in one go-to system. It wasn't standard to think about a work day, but now it is, and that's where compliance will be in the future. And so, sort of having that personal aha moment was when I decided to make this personal jump in my own career. But then also, I've watched so many CCOs go through the same process when they begin working with us. I think that the concept of getting back to using your time on those things that are important for you as compliance professionals and or lawyers, to be spending the time on the things that you want to be spending on and not just administrative duties, it's really, really important. The biggest change, if you sort of get on board with a singular integrated system for managing your program, the biggest change will be in reporting. The immediate benefit of having all the data in one system is for reporting. So slicing and dicing your data, how you want it, when you want it, whether it's quarterly reporting or annual reporting, that's the immediate change. And then the second thing I'll just mention is that all of these great things that we talked about earlier today, the AI and the predictive analytics and machine learning and all that stuff, you can't do any of that stuff. You can't get there. That's sort of cart before horse stuff unless your data And that's, I think it's interesting right now that there's so much talk about how to get there, but there's sort of less talk about this data integration that really has to happen before any of that other fun stuff can happen. So this, again, these are some little icons that sort of capture the way that we think about the status quo. Disconnected compliance management. These are the problems that we see a lot. Specifically, I think the lack of basic automation. I mean, when you're vetting a third party, there's a lot of people that would feel relatively comfortable that when you onboard them, that the company's done a fair amount of homework to make sure that this is a reasonable party to be working with. I think the percentage of people that would say that they're confident that that third party is being re-vetted at appropriate frequencies, depending specifically on the risk profile that party presents, I think the people that would say that they're confident that's happening is a lot lower. And it's the same thing with anything. It's the same thing as making sure that your more minor policies and procedures are getting a second set of eyeballs, every 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, whatever it is. All of these things are things that humans need not be tracking. These are things that systems should be prompting you to look at when it's appropriate for you to look at them. So it's automation, which look, some people consider that kind of basic automation AI. I mean, we don't go around at my company selling AI, but at the same time, I guess that those are basic automation capabilities that we have. So to the extent you think of that as AI, it's AI, I guess. I mean, again, I think that the compliance profession has suffered because of the fragmented technology. I think that the data silos, the core reporting, all of that stuff has contributed to compliance sort of having a second seat to some of the other business units, and it shouldn't. I mean, really good compliance professionals, a lot of people that we work with are people who understand the business in a fundamental way. I think, when you talk to people in compliance who are real visionaries, they understand that the goal is to place controls in places that will not slow down the flow of the business, won't slow down the revenue of the business. And I think getting the technology in place that, again, helps you to handle the basic administrative tasks frees up your time to then sort of move your program forward and focus on the things that are strategic. I want to mention this too. A top issue that was discussed in terms of concerns about adopting new technology. In the first session, one of the top concerns was incompatibility with other tools. You obviously all have some tools in place. I mean, hopefully it's not Excel and SharePoint. Hopefully you have some tools in place that you either bought from an external vendor or that you built in-house. If ever you are looking at a technology provider who doesn't want to work and play well with other technology, that's a problem. That's the tail wagging the dog. And that's how the technology scene has developed in compliance management technology. There's way too many folks who say, it's all or nothing. You sort of have to take our whole system or not at all. We work with plenty of clients who cannot come in and take the entire VN Connect platform all at once. It would just be too much change management. So we deal with a pain point, and then they say, okay, well, we want to look at all of the analytics that we have and all of the data that we have from some existing external vendor or from an existing internal system. We want to flow it into the GAN platform to be able to look at it all in one place. You're never going to get a no from us. And it's not just, this isn't really, again, it's not a selling point exactly. I think it's more just something that when you're talking to people who provide this kind of thing, you want to make sure that they look at this the same way. It's your program. If you have e-learning that you love, that you paid money for and you've invested in and you want to keep using it, you should keep using it. And you shouldn't have some other vendor telling you no to questions like that. All right. Quickly. Time remaining. This is like the Oscars. Okay. So the GAN Connect platform does these things. And this is kind of our central, image that we use all the time. I think, again, as you consider, your program, you should think about, how am I handling these things now, and where am I losing a benefit of having some integration? For example, you want to be able to push policies, procedures, e-learning, and questions, testing, sort of questionnaire type things, to third parties. So if you've got a separate e-learning system or policy management system that doesn't easily push those policies or e-learnings out to your third-party universe, that's a missed opportunity. The same is true with, in the ECI poll from this morning, one of the statistics was that less than half of the people that they surveyed were using any technology whatsoever for risk assessment and strategic planning. I found that to be shocking, totally shocking. And then the commentary in the room were people talking about surveys, which is fine. I mean, surveys is a great way to, kind of do a baseline risk assessment. But again, there's a major lost opportunity to not take some of the statistics that you're having from these other areas, policy, training, investigations, particularly DD problems, and feed them into something that kind of keeps your risk assessment alive. So again, the concept of having a law firm or a PwC come in once a year and do a risk assessment, I'm not suggesting that that shouldn't still happen. That's an important sort of deep dive thing to do. But I think too often people take those reports, they make a priority list for the year, and then they put that report on the shelf until the following year. That doesn't make any sense. I mean, at a time when we have live analytics and metrics that you can measure and use, and the business is changing, right? The business is going into some emerging market, and as a result, you have a completely different risk profile for your third parties. If that happens, you shouldn't be waiting, 8 months until the next risk assessment. Those figures and metrics should be feeding into kind of a live approach to how you're managing your risk. And that's really the sort of top left icon there, the risk icon. That's what we are, I think, probably the most proud of. All of the other modules that we have feed into that place. So long and short is, I think make sure when you're talking to people that all of these capabilities are being handled, that they can funnel into a central place so that you can pull reports, so that you can look at your data live, and that they were built together. I think that's something that you'll see. There are some players on the market who have bought up a lot of different technologies that don't talk to each other. So you're getting common branding, common invoicing, but not actual integration. So that's important to understand. And also the key elements aren't missing. We want to make sure basically all of these things are covered with whoever you choose to work with. This is sort of back to the point that I made a little bit earlier. Blockchain, AI, machine learning, predictive analytics, deep learning, infrastructure as a service. All of these things are just, my LinkedIn is just crazy with these buzzwords. And I swear to you, it's a riot because you cannot do it if your data is not in one place. If your data is fragmented and siloed with different vendors all over the place, you can't do any of this stuff. So it's like I may not be offering, the most sexy topic, but you can't get to the sexy topics until you go through me. so that's where we are. 25% of the ECI poll, and yes, I learned all these statistics in the session this morning. I found it really surprising. 25% of people polled said that they were planning to use AI in the next 2 years. How? I mean, how? Where's your data so easily, put together in one folder so that you can start to do those things? I think it's really just a very important practical thought. Like if you want to be in X place in 5 years or 3 years, what are the things that you need to be doing now to put yourself in a position to be doing that? I would encourage everybody to learn about the programs that are the most progressive. GE has some really cool stuff that they write about. The Financial Times gives an award every year where they quote best use of legal data. I would encourage everybody to look at that and look at the methodologies that they use to choose who has those best programs. Last year the winner was Right, which is Anheuser-Busch ABA InBev's compliance program. We work with them, they're amazing. And then more importantly, it's just the things that they're doing in their program are truly visionary and innovative. And I think starting to look at some of those exemplary programs, can help you understand where you want to be. I am a pretty big nerd in this area. I love this stuff. I guess I'm a lawyer first and a technology person second, but I don't know, these days it's up for grabs. I have 1.5 minutes left, so I wanted to sort of allow any questions or go back to any slides that anybody has. But of course, I'm here all week. I'm really just here today. My colleague Jordan is here and will be here tomorrow. So please flag us if you have any questions that you'd like to discuss or anything else. Any questions about this? It's 9 times out of 10 I'm moderating panels and doing things that are unrelated to technology, so this is one of my first times where I'm actually sort of talking about the GAN Connect platform, and it's a little awkward, but at the same time, I'm also really proud of it and happy to answer any questions anybody has. Looking hard. All right, well, hopefully we can catch up on our own separately. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Valerie. So we're going to be going to lunch now in Maryville. We'll have until 1:05, an hour from now. And also, we do have a reserve table that Holly will be at. There have been some people who have indicated interest in learning more about the analytics lab. And so if you want to join Holly and some of the others over there at that table, look for Holly. Okay, have a great lunch, and we're looking forward to an exciting afternoon. Thank you.
That's all right. Well, and you know what? This is like, because after you did about your code, I was like, I have to come up and remind her at some point, because I wanted to talk to do the same with you. Yeah, absolutely. So here you go. I'll give you a call next week. Okay, that sounds good. Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. But then you don't know if they skip a question because they did not, or because they just skipped a question. That's why it's important to have the because then they have the ability to respond